Okay, think about track cycling for a second. There's this moment on the velodrome where physics just takes over completely. You're on a 45-degree bank, and your only safety is your momentum. If you try to stick to the status quo, the flat road, you don't just slow down, you fall. You have to lean into the curve.
And that's exactly what we're diving into today with what's called the higher tech hive. For far too long, higher education has been, well, riding that flat road. They're stuck in this mental loop that says slow and steady is the only way to govern. But the track has changed. AI has turned the road into a banked curve, and it's time we adjusted our velocity.
I saw this so clearly years ago. I was trekking through the Khumbu Valley in Nepal at, 17,000 feet? And it just hit me that for the communities there, a lack of connectivity isn't just an inconvenience, it's a barrier to safety, to growth, to the future. It's this reminder that if we don't architect for access, we leave brilliant minds behind in the clouds.
So today, we're kind of drafting a new manifesto. We are breaking the loops that keep our institutions tethered to the past and looking toward a global classroom. A world where a student's potential isn't limited by their zip code, but is powered by a borderless AI-augmented architecture.
It's time to stop managing infrastructure and start architecting insight. So let's get off the flat road, lean into the curve, and dive in.
It is a striking image, isn't it? The idea that safety actually requires speed. That sounds completely counterintuitive, especially for how we think about running these large legacy institutions like universities.
Oh, absolutely. When I think of university administration, I do not picture a high-speed cyclist leaning into some death-defying curve. I think of, a committee meeting, about another committee meeting.
Yeah.
Safety usually means checking all the boxes, moving slowly. But this source, the Velodrome Manifesto, it flipped that on its head. It's saying that in the age of AI, moving slowly is the most dangerous thing you can do. So let's unpack this flat road idea. What does that actually look like?
We are looking at the traditional waterfall method of planning. Think about a typical university, or really any large organization. They sit down, they form a massive steering committee, and they write a strategic plan 2030. They map out every milestone, every budget item, every deliverable for the next 5 years. It's totally linear. It flows in one direction, step by step, like a waterfall.
Which sounds responsible, right? I mean, you want to know where you're going. You don't just burn cash without a map.
It was responsible. And it's effective. In a world where technology moved linearly, if you were building a new library, waterfall planning is great. Concrete takes time to cure. Physics doesn't change much. But we are not in that world anymore, not with information. We are in the AI era. The landscape shifts, not every 5 years, but every 5 months, sometimes every 5 weeks.
That's the friction point. If I lock in a budget today for a specific AI tool, by the time the procurement office approves it 6 months from now, and we implement it in a year, that tool might be obsolete. Or worse, the problem it was meant to solve has completely changed.
Precisely. That is the flat road. You're assuming the ground beneath you is static. But with AI, the ground is moving at 100 miles an hour. If you stick to that waterfall plan, you end up delivering a solution for a problem that no longer exists, using tech that's already outdated. You've successfully executed a plan that is now totally irrelevant.
So the flat road is assuming the ground isn't going to move. But it is. That sounds terrifying for an administrator.
It is if you refuse to adapt. And that is why the manifesto calls for adaptive governance. This is where that velodrome analogy is so perfect. When a cyclist is on that track, they aren't planning the exact angle of their bike for the third lap while they are still in the first. They can't.
Right, because someone might cut them off, or the wind could shift, or anything.
Exactly. They are reacting. Reacting to the draft of other riders, the friction of the surface, the immediate physics of the moment. They are constantly adjusting. They're present. Adaptive governance means building a system that can pivot. It means moving away from rigid, long-term roadmaps to a model where you can sense and respond. You have to be able to change direction without crashing the whole bike.
That makes sense, but let's be real. Universities are famous for their red tape. The IT department is usually where dreams go to die. Can I download this? No. Can I use a server? No.
That's Department of No.
Exactly. But this manifesto uses a term I love, pace setters. It says IT leaders need to stop being gatekeepers and start being pace setters. That feels like a huge identity shift.
It is a fundamental shift, and it's one of the hardest parts of this. Traditionally, the IT department's primary metric was stability and security. They were the castle guards. Their job was to keep the bad guys out and keep the data in.
And protecting that flat road.
Correct. But in a velodrome environment, the goal isn't just to stop movement, it's to facilitate speed safely. A pace setter in cycling, they go out front. They cut the wind. They set the rhythm for the pack. They aren't just servicing requests, they are leading. They are showing the institution, look, we can go this fast, and we can do it without crashing. They're enabling innovation, not blocking it.
Okay, but how? I mean, I have to play devil's advocate. Universities deal with student data, federal financial aid, sensitive research. You can't just move fast and break things.
Of course not.
If you break the financial aid system, students drop out. Real people get hurt.
And that is the common fear, and it's a valid one. You cannot treat the university registrar like it's some quirky social media app. But the manifesto offers a solution to this tension. The sandbox.
Sandboxes, I remember those. Lots of messy fun.
The concept is similar, just with less literal sand. A sandbox, in a technical sense, is an isolated environment. You can test code, new tools, without affecting the main system. It's a walled garden. The manifesto argues that institutions need to create these safe spaces for experimentation. The goal is to make failure cheap, fast, and informative.
Cheap, fast, and informative. I like that. It's the polar opposite of how failure usually works.
Exactly. Think about the flat road model. You spend 3 years and $10 million on some massive new system. You launch it on a Monday, it crashes.
Oh, no.
No one gets paid.
Yeah.
Enrollment freezes. That is a catastrophic high-stakes failure. Heads roll.
And because of that, everyone becomes terrified of trying anything new.
Right. Risk aversion becomes the culture. But in a sandbox, let's say a professor wants to try a new AI grading assistant. You put them in a sandbox with anonymized data. If the AI hallucinates or fails, what have you lost?
Not much.
Maybe 2 weeks of testing and 0 critical data.
And you learn something.
You learned exactly what doesn't work. You pivot. You adjust your lean on the bike. You keep your momentum. It changes the culture from one of fear, don't mess this up, to one of curiosity. Let's see what happens if we try this.
It effectively lowers the cost of curiosity. That is powerful. But I want to pivot back to something we touched on in the intro, because this is the heart of the why for me. That story about the Khumbu Valley.
Yes, let's go back to the mountains.
So trekking in Nepal, you're dealing with altitude, isolation, and the manifesto makes this really compelling connection. It says we need to move from providing tech to ensuring agency. Can you break that down for us? What's the real difference there?
This is a critical distinction, and it moves the conversation from, say, logistics to ethics. Providing tech is a logistical task. It means here's a laptop, here's a login, good luck. It treats technology like a utility, like water. You turn it on, walk away, you've checked the box.
We gave them Wi-Fi, our job is done.
Exactly. But ensuring agency is philosophical. It acknowledges that in the modern world, connectivity isn't just a utility, it is the prerequisite for participation. If you don't have robust, high-speed connectivity, you don't have a voice. You can't participate in the global economy. You can't access the best educational resources. Connectivity is the floor of the ivory tower now. If you can't get on the network, you literally can't get in the building.
So when we talk about the Khumbu Valley, or really any remote area rural America, a student in a shelter, we aren't just talking about convenience.
Not at all.
We're talking about the ability to participate in the future.
Precisely. Without that architecture, those minds are silenced. And this leads to the concept of the edge. In network architecture, the edge is the furthest point, the user's device, the remote location. The manifesto argues we need to build for the edge. We need to design our systems thinking about that rural student on a satellite connection, the working parent logging in at midnight.
Usually, though, systems are built for the core, aren't they? You build it to work great in the main office, and if it's slow for the person working from home, well, too bad for them.
That is the traditional mistake. But here is the counterintuitive insight from the manifesto. If you build for the edge, you strengthen the center.
How does that work?
Well, if you build a system that is robust enough, efficient enough to serve a student on a patchy connection in the Himalayas, just imagine how that same system performs for a student in the campus library with a gigabit connection.
It screams. It's bulletproof.
Exactly. It's leaner, faster, more reliable. By solving for the most difficult use cases, the edge cases, you make the core infrastructure better for everyone. Inclusivity isn't just a moral imperative here, it's a quality assurance strategy. If your digital architecture isn't inclusive, it's just not successful architecture.
That is a huge reframe. Usually, accessibility is seen as an add-on, a patch you apply at the end. This is saying start with the edge.
Start with the edge, and the center takes care of itself. It's about recognizing that talent is distributed equally, but opportunity is not. And the job of the higher tech hive is to use AI and architecture to redistribute that opportunity.
Which brings us to the third pillar here, the borderless faculty. We've talked about how we govern the velodrome and who we build for the edge. Now let's talk about where learning actually happens, the global classroom.
And this is where AI really starts to shine, not just as a tool for efficiency, but as a bridge builder. We're moving away from the idea that expertise is siloed in a specific building or department.
Right. The old model is I go to University X to learn from Professor Y because they are physically there. I sit in a lecture hall, I take notes, I go home.
Correct. The tyranny of geography. But imagine a scenario where we de-silo that expertise. The manifesto gives this specific example that I think paints the picture beautifully. Imagine a classroom where a student in San Diego is working on a complex project. They're collaborating seamlessly with a researcher in Bangkok and a developer in Berlin.
All in real time.
All in real time.
Okay, but we've all done Zoom calls across time zones. It's usually a mess. Someone's tired, the audio is bad. How is this different?
The difference is the layer of AI that sits between them. We are talking about real-time AI translation and context awareness. The researcher in Bangkok might be speaking Thai, the developer in Berlin, German, but the student in San Diego hears or reads the input in English instantly, and vice versa.
So the friction of language is just gone.
It is dissolving. We're at a point where this can happen. Suddenly, the pool of collaborators isn't who speaks English or who is in my time zone. It's who has the best ideas.
Wow. So you're sitting in San Diego, but your study group is global. You aren't just learning about the world from a textbook, you are learning with the world.
It fundamentally changes the definition of the classroom. The status quo loop, that flat road, tells us education happens in a room, four walls, a chalkboard. The manifesto argues that education happens in the network.
The network is the classroom.
The network is the classroom. The physical space is still valuable for community, for socialization, but the exchange of knowledge, the creation of insight, that is no longer bound by geography.
It's the ultimate de-siloing. We talk about breaking down silos between departments, like getting engineering students to talk to art students. This is breaking down silos between nations.
And think what that does for the quality of education. If you're studying climate change, you're not just reading a paper from 3 years ago. You're talking to the researcher in Bangkok who is measuring the rainfall right now. You're looking at the code from the developer in Berlin who is modeling the data. It makes learning active, immediate, and deeply interconnected.
It makes it real. It stops being a simulation and starts being an engagement with the world. I can see the administrative headache, though. How do you grade that? How do you schedule it?
And that is exactly why the Velodrome approach is so necessary. You cannot support this kind of dynamic, global collaboration with a 5-year waterfall plan. You need infrastructure that can flex, governance that can adapt. You need to be able to spin up a sandbox for that San Diego, Bangkok, Berlin team in minutes, not months.
It all connects. You can't have the global classroom without the adaptive governance. And you can't have it if you haven't built for the edge, because that researcher in Bangkok needs that connectivity to participate.
It's a holistic ecosystem. You can't just adopt one part of the manifesto. You have to buy into the whole philosophy. You have to accept that the road is banked, the pace is fast, and the goal is no longer just maintenance, but the unleashing of the university.
Unleashing the university. I like that. It feels like we've been keeping these massive engines of knowledge idling in the garage, afraid to scratch the paint.
And the manifesto is handing us the keys and saying, see what this thing can actually do.
Okay, so let's try to synthesize this for everyone listening. We've covered a lot of ground, or track, I should say. 3 main pillars that define this new approach.
First, you've got the Velodrome strategy. That's the shift from rigid waterfall planning to adaptive governance. It's about IT leaders becoming pace setters, using sandboxes to make failure cheap, leaning into the curve of AI.
Second, architecture as a human right. The lesson from the Khumbu Valley. Connectivity is agency. Build for the edge, the most remote, the most resource-constrained, to ensure your systems are robust and inclusive for everyone.
And third, the borderless faculty. The move from the physical room to the global network. De-siloing expertise and using AI, like real-time translation, to allow for collaboration across all borders, time zones, and languages.
So what does this all mean? Why should you, the listener, care? Maybe you're not a university president.
Well, it matters because higher education is often the canary in the coal mine for the rest of the knowledge economy. We're at an inflection point. If institutions keep operating like slow, static bureaucracies, they will be left behind. This manifesto isn't just about cool tech. It's about survival. It's about transforming the university from a static institution into a dynamic, responsive organism, one that breathes and adapts.
It's about staying upright on the bike.
Precisely. If you stop pedaling on the velodrome, you slide down the bank. You have to keep moving.
And that brings it back to you, the listener. We want you to think about this. Where are you holding on to a 5-year plan that was obsolete 6 months ago? Are you acting as a gatekeeper or a pace setter? Where are you still riding the flat road in your own organization or even in your own learning?
It's an uncomfortable question, but a necessary one. The curve is here. You can either fight the physics or you can use them to generate speed.
Absolutely. And before we wrap up, just a quick note. If you enjoyed this deep dive, if you like unpacking these complex ideas, please hit that like and subscribe button. It really helps us keep the show going and helps other learners find the content.
We have some fascinating topics coming up on AI ethics and the future of work, so you won't want to miss those.
But we can't let you go without one final thought to chew on. We've talked about the global classroom, about the network.
Yes, and this raises a provocative question, one that the manifesto hints at but leaves for us to resolve. If education truly happens in the network and not in the room, and if the faculty is borderless and the collaboration is global, what happens to the physical university?
Ooh, that's a big one. What happens to the ivy-covered brick buildings?
Is the campus of the future a place we go to, or is it software we log into? If the place of learning is everywhere, does that mean the university is nowhere?
Or is it everywhere? Something to think about this week. Are you logging in or are you walking in? And does it even matter anymore? Thanks for listening, everyone.
Laying into the curve.
See you next time.